Hi, and welcome to Highbrow, Lowbrow. I'm your host, Shaun. With me here is Roun Sensei. Each week we get together to discuss a well-regarded, highly acclaimed film against a cheesy, crowd-pleasing blockbuster.
Basically an artsy-fartsy film versus a crowd-pleasing good time.
Since we're all stuck at home due to the quarantine, we're hoping you spend some time with us. Ron, how's your isolation been so far?
I never thought this would happen to me, but I don't know what day it is. I don't know if it's a Saturday or a Tuesday.
They just bleed together.
They just bleed together.
Yeah.
Because I drink every day now. Also, I can't get a hold of my barber. Now I look like a Shiba Inu. He's not answering the texts or phone calls. What kind of barber is that?
You gotta just bick it, just get rid of all of it.
Anyway, in lieu of the whole COVID-19 craziness, our first episode will be dedicated to pandemics, diseases, and the most basic of them all are zombies. So in our first episode, we will be discussing the film Cargo versus the original Night of the Living Dead by George Romero.
Cheers, man.
Cheers, dude.
First up, Cargo. Stranded in rural Australia in the aftermath of a violent pandemic, an infected father desperately searches for a new home for his infant child and a means to protect her from his own changing nature. Ron, what did you think of Cargo?
What drew me to the film was the premise, right? When I saw the trailer, I was hooked. I told myself I wanted to see this. It's got great cinematography, sweeping shots of the nature and Australia. They got like a lot of emotional kind of golden hour sunset shots, right? But utterly the film fails. The film is, to me, at the end, is utter shit. It was so disappointing, the way the characters were portrayed and the way everything happened.
I wouldn't call it utter shit, but I did see that it had some issues. First off, let me say that the film, even though I don't think his character was lived up to his acting potential, I think Martin Freeman does a pretty good job at this film, displaying some quiet emotional range, some steely resolve, along with some emotional undertones that sort of conveyed his inner pain. But ultimately, I felt the character lacked a lot of motivation, a lot of drive. I will say I liked the girl's character a lot. I think she did a decent job at the role, but I think the character itself was a really strong motivating force and a sort of unique, sort of mystic guy type of character throughout the film, sort of grounded but also sort of mystic.
I totally disagree with that. I thought that the character of the girl, you know, the tribal girl, was false. It was not the premise, right? When you saw the trailer, she was not included there. But apparently, when the film opens, she is actually the main character because the film starts on her. And it also ends with her. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case when they were marketing the film. So I thought false advertising right off the bat. And also, you know, because of the whole, you know, there's a tendency with films today with the whole woke culture. And it felt that way with that. Like suddenly the tribal people are not only ultimate victims, but also warrior-like. Some, you know, at the end. I mean, at the end there was like a fucking scene.
That's the typical trope of zombie films, right? Society has fallen apart, has crumbled down, and so now the sort of revolution starts because now the wild people can rise up and
but how condescending,
discover the old
how
ways.
condescending is that? They're using spears and everything, and they put war paints and all that with a Jordan 23. They're throwing spears into a skull like Achilles. I don't know anything about Australia, by the way, so I don't know apparently in the movie there's only one redneck Australian who's got access to guns, and not only guns, he's got cages, he's got a fucking truck with lights, he's got a whole encampment built, and, you know, like, he's abusing all these, you know, Aborigines and all
Aborigine people.
I mean, it's so manipulative. I felt like, you know when they say passive characters are no good, This is a passive character. Doesn't make any decisions, doesn't do anything, he's so fucking passive that everything happens to him. Compare that to the same actor, Martin Freeman, in The Hobbit, right? Bilbo Baggins from the beginning is not the same Bilbo Baggins at the end.
I feel like you could have some form of passive character make sense in a certain level of story, and I think that can be pulled off, but I don't think it was pulled off here. I think there has to be some other sort of hat trick or some sense of justification for his passiveness. But ultimately, even in a passive character's arc, they have to discover some level of their own direction. While the disease had a certain level of eerie, foreboding, doom sense, and the zombies had some, foreboding like sense of doom coming upon them. I don't think they never really cashed out on the zombies being like as ferocious or as scary as you wanted them to be. There was never any real big zombie battle.
And the fact that society, I don't know, right? This is again with the whole narrative thing. The fact that society has determined you got 48 hours. You got 48. That's a long time. 48 hours. Like that's what? Like more than, like that's like 2 days, right?
Yeah. I would say I enjoyed it more than Ron, but I do think that it has a lot of issues. And while I would say that it is worth a watch, it's a pretty hesitant watch. So that's our review of Cargo. Next up, we're going to be talking about The Night of the Living Dead by George Romero.
Night of the Living Dead is a 1968 American independent horror film written, directed, photographed, and edited by George A. Romero. If you're wondering what that photograph is, it's the ending sequence. What an awesome ending sequence. Shaun, what do you think of the film?
I've seen this film quite a bit. I've watched it many times. Previously, I did another podcast and I talked about it then, and here I am yet again talking about it now. But I will say, I love the film. I think it's obviously a classic for a reason. The film is the grandfather of all zombie films, I feel. There's probably an older zombie film somewhere, but it's still the grandfather of zombie films in my heart. I think it has a lot of classic shocks, it has a very 50s-ish feel. I can't really place the era of filmmaking. Like I know when it was made, but it feels unique in the sense that it really borders on the hinge of like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, because it has the feel of a 50s film, but a lot of the techniques feel like a 70s film, have a lot of Dutch angles, have a lot of moving angles, very unique and thoughtful filmmaking in this film. And overall, I thought, it sets the standard for a lot of the classic zombie tropes trapped in a house. And it plays them all really well to a T.
It's funny that our first episode is that the classic is the lowbrow, whereas the highbrow is the cargo, because Night of the Living Dead is one of those movies that are smart dumb, right?
I think there is a lot to dive into. I think there's a lot of interesting social commentary happening in this film. The black character has a lot of momentum and a lot of power, and that's sort of surprising to see in a film of that age, although I'm not exactly sure, what kind of revolutionary sort of ideology is going on in films of that time.
But also very unapologetic and very just doing his thing. He is so authentic. I mean, also if you think about it, okay, 1968, right? A lot of racial tensions, a lot of things that you're not used to. It's not the 70s yet. It's not Boogie Nights. It's not like Shaft. Things are just starting out. I'm pretty sure at that time, not many people were very happy to see this dude.
He held me and he ripped at my clothes.
I think you should just calm down.
But he earns your respect. He's doing everything. He's just like boarding up the fucking places and everything. And then, this white girl starts slapping the shit out of him, going hysterical. What does he do? Slaps her back.
Yeah.
Shit.
I felt like it was a pretty, I I don't think it was like super scary because we far past that era where those sorts of scares are really commonplace now. But I do feel like it does have a strong sense of dread and foreboding throughout the film. You know, and the zombies are much more active and fearsome in this movie compared to Cargo, which we'll get into. But I would say that, you know, despite its age, I still think the zombies have a little bit of a kick.
The zombies on this one, right? So now we have a pretty much in our time in 2020, we have pretty much kind of like a criteria of what or how zombies should act. However, in this film, right, the zombies still retain human aspects in the sense that they use tools. You know, these motherfuckers are taking rocks, smashing doors, smashing lights, you know, smashing windows.
Yeah, it's interesting because the news media calls it homicides. Like they call them killers.
Right.
You know, rather than like mindless flesh-eating ghouls, they call them like killers, like murderers. Like there's a wave of homicide going around, which actually adds to the mystique of them because they don't know what's going on yet, which is sort of like novel. Like everyone doesn't know what's going on in a zombie film, but you can sort of piece it together. But in this film, their naivete plays into it because they do act more like killers. They do act like more like a homicidal bunch rather than just like I'll eat all your flesh, you know, because it's more. There's a certain sense of maliciousness to it.
Exactly. Yeah, the malice is there, and if you watch it today, does it hold up? I would say yes. It's been a while since I saw this film, right? Especially the ending.
Yeah. The
ending and the sequence with the photographs and the VO going around. That is so brilliant. And even today, you know, it ends there, and then it makes that statement that, you know, the human race is the most vicious element of it. And therefore the zombies are so fearful because they also exhibit that kind of viciousness. But there's nothing compared to a human being.
To actual humans.
To actual humans. A lot of zombie films today are very kind of, you know, I love Zombieland. I love it. But it's getting to a point where it has to be comedic or something silly. Nobody's got the balls anymore to kind of make an ending like that.
Yeah.
Right? The last one, I think, was the Zack Snyder film, or even a more uplifting one, right? The more positive one would be Train to Busan.
Yeah.
Right? That's the opposite spectrum of it, but nonetheless, it still has that. Nobody has the balls anymore to go that length. Everything has to be silly and superficial now. Now, this is marketed as a very superficial film, but it's not. You know, if you choose to look at it that way.
So you just heard our review of Cargo and Night of the Living Dead. Ron, which one did you end up liking more?
Night of the Living Dead, all the way.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Night of the Living Dead was, you know, still fun, always will be fun. Cargo, I did like it a little bit more than you did, but I do find a lot of faults with it, and I definitely don't think I could return to it in the same manner that I could return to Night of the Living Dead and still discover more and more with each viewing. All right, so those are our thoughts on those two films. Be sure to join us next week when you're trying to find out who was right.
The critics or the masses?